Welcome to the Pulpit and Porch. I'm Tony Marr, and with me as always is my friend Robert Kell.
Hey everybody, we are so glad you're here. The Pulpit and Porch is where we kick back, put up our feet, and have real conversations about life, faith, growth, and maybe even a little sports and pop culture.
If you're looking for a perfectly polished sermon, you're probably in the wrong place.
Yeah, around here, it's more about those honest, heart-to-heart conversations, like the one you'd have on a front porch with good friends. Sometimes we stay on track, sometimes we take the scenic route.
And honestly, that's half the fun, isn't it? We dig into the highs, the lows, and all the in-betweens of living out your faith in real life. Along the way, we may pull up a few extra chairs and invite some friends onto the porch to share stories and ideas that just may change the way that you see things.
So whether you're chasing your purpose, building your faith, or just trying to live a little more fully, pull up a chair, grab some sweet tea, and join us. This is the Pulpit and Porch. We got a seat waiting for you.
You watching anything good on TV lately?
This may not age well over the next hour with what our topic is today, but Happy Gilmore 2 just came out, and I woke up. I didn't get up like 4 a.m. or anything, but I woke up early and watched it by myself.
Yeah, so you shot me a text and said, just watched Happy Gilmore 2.
And it was like 10 a.m.
Yeah, and I'm thinking...
Fridays are my day off.
Well, and I was thinking, did it release yesterday? So I'm driving on the way to my daughter's wedding, and I've got my son in the truck with me, and I said, hey, Happy Gilmore 2 came out yesterday. And then we're listening to the Dan Patrick Show on our way down, and Dan is in Happy Gilmore 2.
Way smaller role than normal for him over the last few
And so they're talking about how it releases today. So I'm sitting there trying to do the math. I'm like, what did you get up at like 4 a.m. to watch this movie? Were you that excited?
I was that excited, by the way. And if that would have been the thing I would have had to have done, if they're like, hey, this comes out at 4 a.m. and then it's not going to be available until Monday, I would have set an alarm for 3:30. And again, we're going to work through our conversation today. I watched it that morning. That afternoon, we had been working, mowing some yards, doing some things, and we all got back to the house, and the boys had about 3 hours before their life kind of got going with some friends and things they were doing. And I was like, y'all, and they're like, yeah. And so we watched Happy Gilmore again. That night, I was sitting down, about to go to bed, and I flipped it back on. And then the next morning, Colby's like, you want to watch Happy Gilmore 2 again? And Melissa's like, well, I haven't really seen the beginning of it. And Melissa's that is her life. I mean, she will just walk in and sit down, or she'll sleep through half a movie.
So you've seen it 4 times.
I've seen it 3.5 times in less than 48 hours. And I have not seen it since then, but life has been incredibly busy, and it is not out of a lack of want to. Here's the thing I'll say. Like, when people talk about top movie lists and things, and you know, you and I have a lot of conversations, and maybe in the next year, if somehow we magically find an extra 5 hours in our week, or 10 hours, probably more like it, in our week, we might, you know, add a podcast to our list of things and do another show that we talk about some media and culture and things like that. But the thing I love about personal lists is I don't have any responsibility to the greater good of media overall. When I say one of my favorite movies, a top 5 movie for me, is The Count of Monte Cristo. I just love that movie. I love the story arc. I love the actors in it. My oldest son keeps going, you need to read the book to give a little more like this, and this. And I probably do need to read the book, but that book's like 18 billion.
It's long.
It's like 18 billion pages.
But it's good.
I need to listen to it because there's no way I'm going to read that. There's no way. But I love that movie, and I don't have to justify. I'm afraid the show dog's going to eat the wrapper that I left laying on the thing. I don't have to justify to anybody. Like USA Today or somebody put out the top 100 movies of this century. I think I sent that to you.
Yeah.
And it's stupid. Gladiator's
It
like
is.
92.
Yeah.
And I'm going, there's no,
You lost all credibility.
there's
right
no
there.
way there are 91 movies. I'm not saying there's not 15 movies better than Gladiator. And we're not talking about Gladiator 2. We're talking about Gladiator 1, Russell Crowe. Like that cannot be in the last 25 years the 92nd best movie on the planet.
Yeah.
No way. And so, like, I think so when I talk about Happy Gilmore, I like Adam Sandler. I think he's funny in most things he does. And I loved Happy Gilmore. I like sports. And when Happy Gilmore 2 came out, I thought this is going to be fun. I thought they absolutely knocked it out of the park. 72 cameos, I think, is the number that one post I watched. I loved that all the actual PGA golfers are in this thing, and just sitting there and watching. I mean, Jim Furyk and Lee Trevino, Jack Nicklaus, Freddie Couples. I mean, I can't even think of all the guys that were sitting around the table and stuff like that. I think they're funny. Their personalities come out, and I've watched a ton of golf. And so, especially those guys that the most would consider to be older, that play on like the senior tour and stuff, that unfortunately aren't that much older than me. There's one guy I was watching this past week that's watching the senior tour, and there was a 53-year-old, and I'm going, come on, really? Like, and I guess these younger guys like Bryson and those guys hit so far now that really good golfers that can still shoot scratch golf from the back tees can't compete, though. They can't shoot 7 under because there's 400-yard par 4s that Bryson and them are driving, and it's just like they can't cut those corners and they can't hit the ball that far. So, but anyway, yeah. So I loved it, and I'm watching still working through the Cosby Show. I'm still like, there's a couple of little things I'm watching. We just finished Stick on Apple TV.
I saw the preview for that. That looks great.
Yeah, and
I don't have Apple TV to watch it, but I watched the preview like twice.
Yeah, no. It's really
Owen Wilson,
good.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the one? Yeah,
yeah. And it's interesting, and I've got a billion thoughts around that, culturally and societally, theologically, and then just I've got some thoughts around it. Is if I was just going to watch it as I'm just consuming media, and is it a good show, and how's the acting, and how's this, and I've got some thoughts in that too. But yeah, it's good. What about you? You watch anything fun?
No. So I'm disappointed. I had this conversation with my wife the other day. So I really love Adam Sandler.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I keep reading more and more about him as a person and what he does. And some of my favorite movies when I was in high school were Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison. And then in college, loved Old School and just loved all those movies. I haven't seen any of those in a really long time. Tommy Boy, man, I loved Tommy Boy. And some of the most quotable movies ever. Watched. We were out of town this weekend for my oldest daughter's wedding, and got back on Sunday and just needed to
you just wanted to unwind.
And so we all jumped on the couch and watched Happy Gilmore 2, and I was so excited for it, especially after your texts, and I just didn't enjoy it. And I sat here with Amanda talking about it, and Amanda loved it, and she said, I love dumb humor. I said, I think I've outgrown it. I think that I don't know what it is. I sat there thinking, this is so stupid. This is so dumb.
So first, let me ask you this. When's the last time you saw the original Happy Gilmore?
I watched it with my son, probably. I watched it with Camden probably 2 months ago.
Okay.
And I loved it. I
watched it maybe a week before, 5 days a week before I watched 2. And I don't here's the thing I'll say. I don't think the humor was as dumb. Like when you talk about Adam with Happy Gilmore was making, like, I would almost call Billy Madison a raunch comedy, that like early onset raunch comedy. And Adam kind of almost made a decision with Waterboy, Happy Gilmore, things like that, to go away from that a little bit, and not Mr. Deeds, which I did not love, but it's fine. The cobbler or whatever, the one that he did where he fixes the shoes, which I actually did really enjoy. But, you know, you look at some of those things, I think he made these decisions inside of his comedic movies to not go like old school. And you mentioned Tommy Boy and some things like that, where it's this heavily deep raunch comedy. The Vacation series that had Ryan Reynolds and stuff and guys like that in it, whereas they go to college and all this kind of stuff. Or you think about, oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank on had Stifler and all those guys in it, and I'm drawing a blank. American Pie.
I've never seen any of those.
I saw, and again, like some of this stuff, again, it's going to be very interesting as we continue. Like incredibly raunch comedies that you move down a path with, and you start to look at and do. But I think Adam just moved out of that vein a little bit. I thought the comedy in this was funny, but I also like a good. I mean, I'm down for like anything where it's kind of family and it's about the family, and you just look at Adam Sandler, and you, for the vast majority, you wrote all of our podcast scripts, and you still do write the vast majority of them. But it's something in the last few months that I've started to, hey, I've got an idea. And you're like, if you have an idea, you can write it. And until then, we will not do it. And so I'm working on another one now that I actually would like to get our wives back on, around parenting and things like that. And I talk about, and I said this in a sermon a few weeks ago, and I may have said it here, like we need better script writers when it comes to parenting and stuff, because at best, Opie is what Mueller says. Opie was a fictional character on a TV show. And so it gets very hard because we want to be Andy Griffith. We want to be,
Bill Cosby.
We want to be the Huxtables. I mean, we want to look at that show. We want to be.
I mean, we don't want to be Bill Cosby. We want
correct.
To be Cliff
That's
Huxtable.
why I said the Huxtables. Yeah. You want to be Cliff and Claire Huxtable, and you want to live in that space to where when your kids do something wrong and you take and empty out their bedroom and give them play money, and your whole family acts as characters to help them understand the things of real life, that at the end, everybody laughs and they get along, and it's like, oh, you're now all going to make better choices and you're never going to do something stupid again. And I think it's just these moments and things of like, it's just not how life works. And I love these more sentimental moments of Grown Ups 1, Grown Ups 2, Happy Gilmore 2, this phase of life that Adam Sandler's in. And I don't know if you watch YouTube golf at all,
no.
But Bryson DeChambeau does these challenges where he's trying to break 50 on golf courses. Well, he did one with Adam Sandler. And Adam's not a great golfer. He's not a bad golfer at all. He's way better than I am. But they might have shot 50. They're trying to break 50, and they shot 50 or 51. They missed it by like a stroke. And that's incredible to think that Bryson's that good, and that Adam added enough shots that they literally almost broke 50 with the two of them playing. And so, which is like 23 under par. Yeah. I mean, that is incredible on that. And Adam's just talking, and he's talking about these things, and he's like, I'm too old for this and this now, and so I have to take on a different role. And in the movie, I loved the fact of just how intentional he was with his family, and, you know, the battle with addiction and the struggle that's really there. And I think there's an incredible amount of redeemable things in it. There's also some stuff where I'm going, should I be watching this? And that's just the tension I sit in all the time. I hate you didn't like it.
I hate that I didn't like it too.
I may watch it this afternoon.
I laughed. I laughed some. I laughed out loud a couple of times. But overall, I just found myself thinking, what are they doing? what are they doing with this? And I don't want to give away spoilers, but in the first 2 minutes, I was like, oh my gosh, this is where we're going with this.
So here's the thing. I was texting with our other dude. They actually, they left out of the thread because our lead pastor hasn't seen it. And the other 2 of the 3 campus pastors had. So the 3rd campus pastor was watching it. And so we're in this campus pastor thread we have that nobody else is in, just the 3 of us. And we're texting back and forth. And the part you're talking about, the guy was like, are you kidding me? And one of the other campus pastors is like, no. And like, yeah, I was like, yeah, yes, that really happened. And I'm going to be honest, the scene right after that, I laughed pretty hard. He said, I'm still in shock. I cannot handle this. And I think most people are like, it was fine. And I'm going, yeah, it was fine. I'll be 50 later this year. That movie came out 30 years ago. So I was 20 when I saw it. Did I see that in theaters? Maybe. And I don't know. I love golf. I loved the cameos. I thought what they did with Shooter was fantastic. And I laughed out. A buddy of mine, I was talking to him and he said, yeah, my daughter was sitting there and she would reach over and go, Daddy, be quiet. And she would cover his mouth because he was laughing so hard. And I laughed pretty hard throughout the vast majority.
I'm happy
of the movie.
for you. I really am. I wanted to love it like that. And like I said, I'm disappointed that I didn't love it like that. And it made me think, I can't tell you the last time I've watched a movie like that. You've got Naked Gun coming out in theaters. And I loved the old Naked Gun
never
movies.
watched those.
Oh, I loved them. And so the new one comes out with Liam Neeson here sometime. And I'm watching the previews and I'm like, that used to make me laugh so hard, that stuff. And I'm just sitting here watching the preview saying, I'm not spending $42 for me and my wife to go to the movies and see that. I'll maybe catch it when it comes out on Netflix. And I don't know that I'll enjoy it then. And I'm disappointed. I wish that I was like, man, I gotta watch that again. I'm like, nah, I don't know that I'll watch Happy Gilmore 2 again.
See, and that's the thing. Like, I wouldn't pay to go see Happy Gilmore. It's on a list. It's on a very, very short list of movies I probably would pay to go see these days. There's still a point of, if no Lord of the Rings came out, if some version of that, whether The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, whatever, like that, those are movies we take our family to see. New Star Wars flicks, we would go watch those, and I would probably still do some of that, like a family, like, hey, let's go do this. As your kids get older and they are dating and stuff, that gets way more expensive. And so you start going, I think I'll just stay at home. I'd rather, like, where do y'all want pizza from? You want it from Chicago? I'll just fly it in. I mean, it's cheaper than taking you all to the movies. I will fly fresh Chicago deep dish pizza into the house. Here we go. And I think that it's just, it's so expensive. So, some of that I start to think there, but just even me and Mel going, I wouldn't, I'm like you, I just wouldn't pay that. And so I think about the AMC Movie Pass thing, and I'm going, maybe that's something I should do. But anywho.
Yeah, so I haven't watched anything new that I would rave about.
Yeah. I probably still watch a little too much, but I'm a little more of a purpose behind most of it, I think, and I'm just working through some things and thinking about, and I've slowed down a little bit, but a little more intentional about some of those things and stuff like that. So, which kind of brings us to today. Talking about, how did I title this, I guess?
Holy versus Hulu.
Yeah. What should be, like a Christian responsibility in navigating media. And I think that the starting point, so I like a couple of things.
If it's not on right now, you shouldn't watch it.
A couple of things, I guess. One, media, like, we can define media as a whole lot of stuff. And, it's, of course, things we watch on TV. It's, social media. It's even in the title. So the time we spend scrolling through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, all the things that we have and do there. People still read newspapers? I mean, newspapers, magazines, like the list goes on and on and on of what is media. Just for the sake of today's conversation, the vast reality of where we're going to spend our time is inside of what we're streaming, watching on TV, inside of movies, TV, and that culture and how it affects our life. So that's there. My question starting out for you, which is not in the notes. So, I was driving here. I was getting in my vehicle to drive here this morning, and I pulled up my Apple Podcast, and the first like 4 things were of the podcast for the next things. Should Christians read fictional literature that contain magic? The Fantastic Four First Steps is here, plus our fall film review. Fantastic Four, Superman, and more, a deep dive analysis of this summer's movies. A rewatchable podcast about one that I'll probably listen to, but it won't be it's not my favorite movie. And I think even there was another random one in here. Are we moving from post-Christianity to post-secularism? And those are like the 5 first recommended. So I spend a lot of time listening to these things and navigating this stuff. And so driving over here, I was listening to the podcast about, is it okay for basically Christians to watch and read Harry Potter? And so my question for you is this: should Christians watch anything that contains sin? Because that's something in my research that really popped up a lot. Should Christians watch media that contains sin? And again, for the purpose of this conversation, we're talking about TV shows, Hulu, Netflix, Prime TV, movies that we go to, that kind of stuff.
Sure. I think because if we completely eliminate ourselves from the presence of sin, then we've just wrapped ourselves up in bubble wrap, and we're not going out and making disciples in a sinful world like Christ has called us to do. And so I think you even look at some of the, and I am not a big fan of Christian media, but even a lot of the popular Christian movies, if you were to say, I'm not going to watch anything that contains sin in it, well, then you're getting rid of those, because the very basis of those movies is redemption.
Yeah.
And so without sin, there is no redemption. Without a fall, there is no need for Jesus. And so what I tell people all the time is said, well, if you haven't sinned, then you don't need a savior. And so if you think that you've done nothing wrong, then we don't need to be talking about Jesus, because if you haven't done anything wrong, if you haven't sinned, then there's no need for a savior. And so I think to completely say that we should eliminate anything out of our lives that has sin, then we're also eliminating relationships with people who are sinful, which eliminates our ability to have any kind of voice in their life or speak into their life in any way. I think the difference is it something that glorifies sin would be the thing that I would say.
What was the quote I sent you this morning? I was listening, and I apologized, and I said, hey, I'm sorry I'm using you as my notes app, but I'm driving, and it was just easier to voice text you. The quote I heard in the thing was, does it promote sin or does it wrestle with sin? And I think I thought that is an incredible thought.
Yeah.
That the host of this episode, this podcast I was listening to, was talking about, is just, and he referenced, he's like, one of my favorite movies is Gran Torino, and I've shown it to all of my boys, and I love that film, but there is a ton of tension and sin and struggle that comes into that leads to a better understanding of our neighbor. You see a guy begin to literally like love his neighbor as himself. I don't know that, 20 plus year old movie that we're really spoiling anything, but you see a guy that sacrifices to the point of his life, that ends up giving and investing in these friends that these people that become his friends that were literally his enemy when he was in war, when he was in Vietnam and he was there, this demographic, this race of people was his literal enemy. And now they're living next door to him, and he's trying to figure out how to navigate and work through that tension. And you see that evolve. And I think that's the thing for us as followers of Jesus, is how do we sit in that? And so I agree with what you're saying. I just thought it was an interesting question. And when I was researching this, I was kind of blown away at like how many people are just like, should we do this? And you see some people that go and just looking at media collectively and looking at the Bible as a part of media, not as how you and I and probably a lot of our listeners as, the inspired word of God. But like, it's like people like, you couldn't read the Bible if you cannot consume any media that has sin in it, because the whole thing is God's people continually trying to and attempting and succeeding and moving away from what God calls us to. And yet at the same time, his pursuit and how that redemption comes and where we get back to in that space.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think this conversation is complicated for me. And I don't really, I don't know that I've managed this well in my life. You and I have talked early on now. I mean, it's 2 years now since we first started doing some podcasting stuff together and working through some of these things. And I guess it's 2 years on the show pretty full time now.
Yeah.
And so it's a little over 2 years that we've been working through all of this. And we've talked for a while, like we've had some different approaches to what's okay, what's not okay personally in media and what we or TV and movies and what we consume. And so you and I talk a lot off air about this kind of stuff. And I've changed some of my views, and not views per se, but I've changed my approach of what I'll consume and what I won't consume. And I don't know that our personal, parental settings or whatever are necessarily helpful or the point of this, because I think we all have to, scripture say, develop our own faith and fear and trembling and work through this and move through some things. But there is this question of like, man, does it move you away from, sorry, I leaned away from there, away from Jesus and away from honoring the Father or not? And so, so here's another question. Do you think media was ever designed to be consumed, or to be neutral, I guess, to just be brainless consumption like we treat it?
No, I don't. I think that nothing is ever just entertainment, right? Nothing is ever just entertainment. Even meaningless shows or something like that is always shaping or selling us something. An ideal, a worldview, even what is supposed to be neutral still has a bent. It still has a worldview that it's carrying. Nothing is ever just strictly entertainment. It's all trying to shape you or sell you something.
The thing I always find interesting in this is that when we sit in a Christian perspective and we talk about this, it's this thing of, you're being a little stodgy, or you're just kind of a grumpy old curmudgeon, or whatever the word. I'm not going to bring that word back today other than that one time. It's just like, it's this grumpy old man mentality, or you're just get off my lawn, or you're trying to stop people from having fun. You just don't want people to understand the world. And I do think there's things that are bad for us. I think there are things that are unwise for us to do. But one of the things that I found really interesting inside of this thought and this idea was listening to some, is there a better word than secular and Christian for the sake of this conversation? Or because
mainstream?
Okay, maybe that's a better word. So mainstream, just somebody who I don't know that they would call themselves a believer. They definitely, because they review film and things, and they review culture, they talk about things in scripture and they understand the connectedness in that. But they take the Superman movie, which I have not seen and I will not spoil anything for anybody. But they said, if you think James Gunn isn't addressing major societal issues inside of his film, you're a moron. And they said, when you think about immigration, when you think about the society and the things that are going on, and they just start listing all of the stuff that these people would not be big Trump supporters. And they would say these things that Trump is doing, these things that the government is doing, go against what we think is a fair or good society. So James Gunn inside of Superman, and they said, if you think he isn't addressing this, you're crazy. Because most people are going, oh, people are just in here trying to make this out to be something that it's not. But Hollywood is really, and these are people who they have no agenda to like go, and because of that, this is why John 7 is such a big deal. Like, this is why we can see this, or we understand this in Romans, or we see this here in Ezekiel, or, Revelation. That's why, the mark of this is coming and doing. Like, these are mainstream, what the vast majority of time we call secular podcasters, just reviewing a film, that are looking at it as a collective thing. And they're saying, this guy is absolutely trying to shape your worldview to align to what he thinks is a fair society.
Well, all media, I don't care if it's
Agreed.
movies, TV, news, songs, music, podcasts, all media is a vessel for an idea.
Yeah.
And there's no such thing. You can have Fox News that say fair and balanced, but there's still a worldview that they're carrying. There's no such, your original question, there's no such thing as neutral.
Yeah, no. And I think that's the hard part of this, is when we walk in, it's like we look at things from this perspective of, I just want to check out. I've had a long day. I want to sit down. I want to brainlessly consume media. But if the people writing it have an agenda and you're not on guard, like, can it start to shift how you think and view? And I would say yes. I think you would as well. I don't think it means we have to sit down with a notepad and a Bible, and every second of media that we watch that is this monstrously time consuming thing. But I think we have to look at this from a perspective of how it's shaping, and it is designed to cause us to think. Like, I'm telling you, growing up with the Cosby Show and Full House and all these things, there was a level of parenting will function that way. When I get older, these are things I'll be able to do. And I've never once thought about when my kid, and it's the same episode I'm talking about here, is like season 1 or 2, when they take everything out of Theo's room and pretend that they're not his family, and that he's shown up at a place, and they give him some money to rent an apartment, and he has to get references, and he has to get a job, and he goes and gets his buddy Cockroach to be pretend to turn or a businessman or something that says he has a job, and he's paying him this much, and he can make this money and pay this thing and do this thing and blah, blah, blah. And all this stuff, I've never seen that. I've never once, when I felt like my kids were a touch entitled, where I was motivated enough to empty out their room, leave them with a blank room, and hand them some Monopoly money and go, yeah, I'm going to want to put all that back together in 12 hours when this little demonstration is over. I've never wanted to do that. But yet, like, we live in this world where we want things to function and families just to kind of come back together and get life better. And then all of a sudden it isn't as easy. The script doesn't always work out for us the way that it does on shows.
Yeah. Media is a message. So media, regardless of its format, carries a message. And any message is going to carry the paradigm, the ideology of the creator of the message, the giver of the message. So even if unintentional, it's not neutral. Which poses another question, that if all media is giving a message, if all media is giving a ideology that the creator of the media is trying to get across, have we learned more from media than we have from Sunday school? Or even more specifically, have we learned more theology from Marvel in the last 20 years than we have from church?
think we've anticipated Marvel more than we have church. And I think that's a complicated thing. And we want to see what happens there. Like, I'm not a comic book nerd. So when things happen in the story, I have a couple of friends who are comic book nerds. And I love after I see a movie going, okay, where'd they miss it at? What was good? What are you hating about this? And especially early on, Iron Man movies and Captain America and things like that. And it was just these incredible conversations around, yeah, I mean, this was really designed for this. In the comic book, it does this, it does this. I mean, Tony, the thing I guess I would say is if you're not reading your Bible and you're watching Marvel, then yes, we have gotten more theology from comic books and fictional Jesus-looking characters than we have Jesus himself. Thoughts?
I would take it even beyond Marvel. I know I specifically asked you about Marvel, but I think Marvel, I know you're a huge Star Wars person.
I do enjoy Star Wars.
Taylor Swift.
Oh, my goodness.
They're telling stories that people understand. And I think that the church often forgets that theology without story rarely sticks. We can teach all we want, but without story, it doesn't stick. And I think that if Avengers teaches us more about sacrifice than Sunday school, that's a problem. But it's also an opportunity.
Can I step on our next episode for half a second to maybe tease it out a little bit? And then we'll move right back into this. Do you think part of the tension, like I was sitting with, we went to a, I call it minor league baseball, Happy League baseball game the other night. And we're sitting there, and the boys and I and some friends of theirs, we're all just sitting and chatting and talking and watching the game. And something comes up about music. It might have been over dinner. They came over and ate dinner with us before we all left. And so it might have been over dinner. And there was an album. I think it was Olivia Rodrigo. It came up. And they were talking about some album that was put out. And this was like, oh, yeah, like our oldest son thinks that's maybe the best album. That it's one of the best albums that's ever been put out or something like that. And this, and this. And he's a music major and he gets very opinionated about music and thoughts and ideas. And I'm just sitting there and as you're talking, I'm going, why don't we, when's the last time somebody sat around and they went, oh man, that new Brandon Lake album's maybe one of the best albums ever written. And that's, by the way, no offense to Brandon Lake. I actually think he's doing an incredible job, like him or hate him or whatever you want to do with him. I'm trying to think of the guy that just broke his back, that skateboarding, that has the song Your Way's Better. And I'll think of it here in a second. But like those guys, one, have Christians created good media that point people to Jesus, that have good spiritual conversations. And if they have, anytime somebody starts to ascend to this maybe clout status, this famous status, we go, well, brother, that should be a calling. And now you're out here and you're just trying to be famous and you're trying to be Jesus rich and stuff. And so have we as believers continually pushed down the creation of good, faithful messaging of Jesus and caused, and so in that, I like a lot of Christian music and media in certain areas. I shouldn't say a lot. I like some, just like I like some what would be considered mainstream. But have we kind of kiboshed, and that whole thought of calling versus clout is kind of an episode we've got coming up. And is this status thing been something that we've just started to step on people who are trying to do good? Because Brandon Lake has caught a ton of junk for his Hard Fought Hallelujah song and Bringing in Jelly Roll and all of the things that are going on.
One of our most popular episodes ever.
Yeah. And so I just wonder, have we stepped on that in a way? Because you were talking about Taylor Swift, and my kids who review movies all the time, like talk about music and albums and things all the time. I've never heard them once go, that new Audio Adrenaline album's killing it, man. That thing's maybe one of the best. And I'm Jars of Clays, like I'm doing old stuff on purpose there. But I don't hear them say that same thing about new artists, that they're really killing it inside of the Christian world. And have we let it down in that?
So, yes, now in full transparency, I am not as up to speed as I used to be on Christian music and that whole industry. I used to follow it very closely. I will say still my favorite all-time band is Switchfoot. They're working on a new album right now. Absolutely love them. I love John Foreman. I think that he's brilliant and an incredible human being.
Switchfoot, though, is like the equivalent of the Foo Fighters. It's someone that you loved a long time ago. They've aged with you. They're your age, maybe a touch older, and you really enjoy that. And so there's a nostalgia to it. The question would be is if you walked into Foo Fighters today and they dropped a new album, like people who like Bon Jovi love that, like they drop a new album and you're going, oh man, this is great. And even though they were super popular in the 80s, in the 2000s, when Have a Nice Day came out, the Have a Nice Day album came out, and since then th've dropped a couple other albums, or more than a couple, but they dropped some other albums. People go, oh, I love that. But no, okay. So anyway, yes, but Switch was still one of your favorite bands. You're not as connected to the music, and
yeah. So I couldn't answer the question educatedly, if that's a word, about are we stepping on the toes of new artists and not letting them? The term used to be crossover. Crossover into mainstream media. And you brought up Jars of Clay. Jars of Clay did that huge.
They were on like a CSI episode, I think, with one of their songs.
Their
some things
Flood
like that.
song was a top hit for years. Switchfoot, same way.
Mm-hmm.
Their Beautiful Letdown album really took them over to a mainstream audience, sold over 1 million copies, was a top 10 album on the rock charts for better part of a year. I don't know that you're seeing that anymore. I'm not sure. I know NF has done some things in hip hop that he had one of the top tours of the last couple of years. But I really don't know. I don't know. I don't know enough about that industry anymore to speak profoundly into that.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a ton of answers either, because anything I would have would be nothing more than research, and I don't know people that are like, I know people in the music industry just like you do, but I don't know anybody that's sitting at the top of like the CEO of some major recording label that could have that level of conversation, that really, really knows like, hey, here's the tension we're facing. We're wanting to bring, artist A, B, C, D, and E along, but it's almost this thought of like, is it like are Christians like in their the old ways the best way, continuing to stomp on future artists? And we just live in a world where people feel way more famous than they used to be. And I think the thing too is we're okay with people being famous if they work the agenda that we're comfortable with. And I think so if it matches our style of music, or if they sing it the way we want, or if they do it the way we want, or something like that. And it's just one of those things, you hear the quote, only our heroes fall. And you see so many people fall that I just think people are a touch nervous. And so how do you think we typically approach media? Is it fair? Christians, should we say it that way? Like, how do you think Christians typically come at media in your experience?
I think that we live two separate lives. We've got our Christian media that we get excited about. We listen to Air One or the Christian radio stations in our car, and we get excited about the Christian movies that come out in our local movie theaters, and we rush to buy the tickets for those and talk about them on social media. But then the other side of it is we're watching Dexter and listening to Taylor Swift and on the other side. And so I think, and there's a distinction, I think there's a distinction. There's not a lot of overlap between the two. And we've got our Christian side and we've got our other side, and the two rarely blend.
So you mentioned, okay, so Mel and I watched Dexter years and years. And I mean, like when it was out and it was active and going, we watched Dexter. I mean, did that show come out in like 2003 or something? I mean, it was a long time ago. We watched it originally then. And the question starts to become, because one of the things that was interesting about the podcast I listened to this morning was like, is it okay to let your kids watch and listen to Harry Potter? And should you be allowing shows and movies in your house that have witchcraft or something? And I don't necessarily plan on going down that rabbit hole today, but violence inside of film and movies. I mean, Dexter is about a guy who works for the police department who is a serial killer that murders bad people. He has a code. He only murders people. Well, supposed to be that way, but then people get in his way sometimes, and he has to take them out too to keep his life going. And his dark passenger gives him this moral compass of, oh, this person might be a good person, but they're going to stop me from doing good, so I'm going to remove them as well. And so do you think that and then we start to glorify, no, I've never talked to anyone that watched Dexter that went, man, I was so pulling for the cops to catch him.
It bothers me that you have people that are Christians that will picket and boycott Harry Potter, but then we'll turn right around and watch 50 Shades of Grey.
No, 100%. Game of Thrones. Those types of shows that it's just different content and it's a different struggle. And I think that's part of the thing for this episode. Go ahead. No.
I say that, and that really bothers me. And yet I do the same exact thing. And you and I have talked about that.
Do it as well.
I don't mess around with sexuality in media. If there's sexuality of any kind, it's off limits. The only images that I want in my mind are of my wife. And so anything that is going to put an image that is not Amanda in my mind, I don't want that. But yet I'll watch shows that have extreme violence that don't bother me at all. I really, crazy language I don't like, but I'll watch shows that use words frequently that you would never hear come out of my mouth. And so I'm really the same way as the people who say, well, you can't watch Harry Potter, but we're going to watch Love Island.
No, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. And here's the tension too. Like, that guide, that buffer is different for every person. So I'm just throwing you and I under a bus here, and you might say you're not throwing me under any bus. We can.
I just ran myself over with the bus.
So we talked about Happy Gilmore, and the lady that plays the love interest in the first, and his wife. As things move on in the movies. I was going to say series, but I'm like, that's not right. The movies. There's a whole scene where she's in lingerie and carrying beer, and like the scene in the first one with her and Shooter. I mean, sometimes I'm watching that and I'm uncomfortable. Like, he's pretty super handsy with her, and I'm going like it feels like that went too far. Like, I feel like you could have sold everything you needed to sell there without your hand getting that far around and doing that kind of stuff and things like that. And you just kind of go, man, that's a weird scene. But she's, in lingerie I mean, and she's doing, and somebody go, well, that's just stupid. And I'm like, but for some people, that would be a line that's too far. And seeing her like that would have them on Google searching for things. And so that's the tension that this is, and how we sit in. And so, I mean, because, you know, we get a song that we hear it and we start humming it, and we realize, oh, that's probably not a good song. As we are aging parents and we put songs in front of our kids that we're like, oh, I love that song when I was a kid. And you're going, I do not love that song now that I have kids. And go ahead.
All the time.
No, I thought you were going to say something else.
I was going to say that happens all the time with me.
And it's one of those things too. Like, I was working with a company one day, and I was newer with this company, and I was doing some social media stuff and a couple of things. And so I would send them posts. I mean, and it was in a market I hadn't really worked in before. So I would send them posts before I did it. And they had this huge sponsor event, and I thought I was being clever, and I remembered one line, and just in my brain, I didn't go past that line. I didn't even remotely think. And I was using the line from Top Gun where, you know, hey, the list is long but distinguished. And if you've seen that movie, you understand the next line is not a very good line. And the lady that was checking the stuff sent back and said, yeah, we probably shouldn't use that because here's the next line. And I'm like, you know what? You're 100% right. And anybody that catches the joke is going to immediately connect that thought to this company. And there's going to be some people that goes, oh, that's funny as all get out, man. I love that. That's hilarious. I'll give them more business. There's going to be some people going, if that's the character of that company, I may not want to work with them anymore.
Well, I have all the time that a song from the 90s will come on the radio, or I have this curse that I'm a human jukebox. And so anything that's happening in a conversation, a song lyric will pop into my head about it, and I'll usually start singing it. And oftentimes I'll start singing the song that it's a song that I haven't heard or thought about in 30 years. And I start singing it out loud, and then I realize, whoa, hold on. Or my kids will say, Dad, you know that song? And I'm like, yeah, I wish I didn't. And or it comes on the radio and you start singing along. You're like, whoa, I know every word to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I never realized. And then there are times when I'll say things that I don't even know what they mean, and my kids will just be dying laughing, saying, I can't believe you just said that, Dad. And I had no clue what it was or what it meant in today's terminology or slang. And
well, Melissa listens to a podcast that they do like a word of the week, or like once a month they do a couple of words, and Melissa will take those words and go into, like, as she's walking through life with the boys, and she will use it in a sentence. And I mean, at some point in time, she used skibbity or skibbity doo or skibbity bop, whatever it's called. And I think I've said before, I remember, good gracious, well over a decade ago, the first time I was standing around with, thankfully, a friend of mine who's my age, and I was doing some photography at this camp, and they were on a break, and she was like, hey, would you like a drink? And they had drink stuff. She was grabbing me a drink. And I said, yeah, that'd be awesome. I'm super thirsty. She said, you can't say that word anymore. And I was like, come on, coach, what are you talking about? And she told me, and she said, I found out because I was like, oh, I'm so thirsty, I need to go get some water. And all the girls like, ooh, coach, what are you doing? And it's like, she's like, well, you cannot co-opt every word in the world and just make us old people try and figure it out. And I think that's the whole tension for me, is that sometimes we get to this place that culture starts moving, and it is so hard, like you said, with some of those things. But like, when we look at these things and we start humming this stuff and we go, I think it's that reminder that we aren't mindlessly consuming things. Or there was a season in our life that we were mindlessly consuming, and it's only mindless until it hits a point that it matters. And when we don't want our kids to become the same person that we were, that's when this becomes a tension and becomes a struggle. And we don't want them to think the same way that we thought. We want their thoughts to be more pure. We want their life to be more focused on Jesus. And we're not saying that we were the devil, or maybe we were saying we were the devil, but like, it's, it's, as we had to go to a funeral recently, and we're standing there with some family that was at this, and just talking to one that this one of my wife's uncles, and I mean, this guy's cool as all get out. And he's like, yeah, man. I was like, back when I was like 18, he's, I don't know, he might 70 now. And he's like, I'm doing 140 down the highway. I'm going, oh my goodness. Trans Am. I was like, were you Burt Reynolds? I mean, was this where Smokey and the Bandit the idea came from? But he was, I mean, just cool as all get out, but he was just doing crazy stuff. And it's like, we don't want our kids to be that. I mean, I'll promise you, he never looked and said, I want my kid to do 140 down the local highway with their two little cousins in the thing screaming to get out of the vehicle. Like, that's never what he wanted. And so we do things and go, it's okay. But yet we turn a corner and we go, I don't want my kids to do this, but they've watched us do it for years. And what one generation does, the next generation will tolerate, and the generation after that won't even know it was a sin. I think that's the tension. I think I saw a pastor quote that on some social media thing a few weeks ago, and that's the tension for me. Is that, are we doing things, or were things done by my parents that I'm tolerating that my kids won't even know as a sin? And that's my concern.
I think it's to add, I think you missed a part of that quote.
I might have.
I think the third part is what one culture doesn't like, the next culture tolerates, the next culture celebrates, and then not culture, but
what one generation tolerates, the next generation celebrates, the next generation won't even know it's a sin. That's right. That's perfect. Thank you for fixing, because you were at my sermon that week. Yeah, that's the tension for me. And that's where I'm struggling is, are we doing things now that are putting stuff into a light that's making it really, really hard for us to navigate? And so that's just my thing. Like, are we celebrating stuff? Okay, so here's a question. Like, I remember when shows like South Park came out. I remember SNL not coming out. I would have been like it's like just celebrated 50 years, didn't it?
Yeah, 50 years this year.
So like literally it came out the year I was born. And so I don't remember, and I wasn't allowed to watch it growing up. It wasn't a show that I was allowed to watch. And so there's a lot of things with SNL that people think are hilarious that if I want to know what they mean, I have to go back and look it up. But like, when's the last time that you can think of, and you and I both read a lot of random articles and things. And even if we don't prescribe or subscribe to this type of mentality, like, when's the last time you can think of an album or a TV show or a movie that just really made people nervous? Like inside of what I would call the Christian world.
I would say this latest Taylor Swift album got a lot of headlines. Mm-hmm. It was so widely anticipated. Taylor Swift is so beloved by Christians and non-Christians. And the new album came out. It was one of those that people were staying up till midnight to wait for it to drop on the streaming platforms. You don't go down to Blockbuster Music anymore or Tower Records anymore to get the CD or the cassette.
Nobody's lined up outside. There's like have 11
Tuesdays.
copies.
Remember, everything came out on Tuesday. But then some of the themes in that, I think, shook a lot of Christian people that were great proponents of Taylor Swift. And there was a lot of controversy surrounding that album and the language that was used and the thematic elements that were used. I can remember seeing a lot from people being very outspoken about that. And I can remember thinking, I wish that you would be just as outspoken at some of the things that are happening in our country and around the world as you are about Taylor Swift's album.
Yeah, Sabrina Carpenter's album cover definitely caught a lot of interesting heat that we even talked about. Some of like she did what was, she put out a second album cover and took a little bit of a stab and said, here's a God approved album cover for all you guys. And I think that's something that's kind of interesting to go. And I think that, that's that whole thing. And so when you look at, that created a ton of uproar. There's some things that come post like we did a huge conversation around the Super Bowl, and the halftime show and what came out of that and everything that was said there. And that was, we couldn't really know until we got there and it was over what it was going to be. But like, is there other moments where, like, when we were all kids, it's like, I'm just listening to the beat. I don't even know the words. And like, are there moments that we appreciate great production without absorbing the worldview?
To a point, yes. But I think that repeated exposure affects formation. We don't just watch. We eventually start to see ourselves in what we're watching and what we're listening to. And so I think that yes, we can appreciate great production without it being an immediate effect on who we are, but the consistent absorption of that, it's going to eventually absorb into you and it's going to affect you in some ways.
So we're not just mindlessly consuming, we're kind of curating what shapes us. So we're like putting into the playlist, we're setting our cue, we're getting our my favorites list, and it's like, it's not a mindless consumption. We're almost mindlessly putting a list together of things that's going to shape us.
I listened to a podcast this last week that talked about how we are all being shaped and manipulated by the algorithm. And we don't even we don't even realize the effect that the algorithms are having on what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're watching, what's being put in front of us. And our entire is predicated on what algorithm we're put into. And we like to think that we're curating, but the algorithm's doing more of the picking than we are. It's putting in front of us what we want to see. And that's why awareness and boundaries, like you were talking about earlier, are so critically important. Curation requires us to be intentional about what it is that we're consuming.
Yeah.
Whereas just straight consumption doesn't require us to be intentional. We're just consuming. We're just consuming. But if you're curating, then you have to be intentional about what you're consuming.
No, that's a good thought. So what's the line then between becoming these almost cultural snobs versus sellouts? If we're going to sit in this space of how we navigate some of these things, like, or maybe I should say this. We kind of said like people are going to have to kind of work through their own thing a little bit, but is there a line that's clear enough between the cultural snob, the Christian snob, and a sellout that's just, hey, you're terrible for watching this, but I'm going to go watch this. You're terrible for listening to this album, but I'm going to listen to this album that's really, apples to apples type of comparison. Which might kind of lead to this path. By the way, I don't know that there's a great answer to that. I think it
comes back to what you said at the very beginning. The line that you sent me at the at on your drive-in this morning.
Yeah, is it promoting it or wrestling with it?
Yeah.
And I think that's so let's.
But again, I think according to Jesus, we're supposed to engage with culture. You look at Jesus, he engaged with culture. He didn't boycott culture. He didn't turn his nose up to culture. He engaged with culture. We're not called to hide from culture, but we're not supposed to blindly absorb culture either. We're called to be in the world, not of the world.
Well, I mean, it goes back to even Paul. I mean, when you think about when he's talking and he's like, in Acts 17, and he's kind of rattling through some of these things. If Paul stood up today and he started using lines or, from Dua Lipa and Deadpool, what would people think about that inside of some of these conversations?
You can't disciple a culture that you don't understand. And we're called to be disciples and make disciples. And you can't disciple a culture that you don't understand. Jesus was never out of touch with culture. Jesus was right in the middle of culture. He ate with sinners. He quoted popular pagan philosophers. He used cultural metaphors all the time. I mean, seeds, coins, kings. He was right in the middle. He was engaged with culture, but he didn't let the culture influence him. We can't reach what we refuse to understand. And so we have to understand what's happening in culture. We have to understand what's happening in society. We have to engage with it. We just can't let it absorb us.
Well, I mean, you and I have even talked about the verse in First Chronicles. I always say his name wrong. I'm such a redneck from the South. It's like saying Nevada, which it's not, is it? It's Nevada.
Come on, man.
Is it?
How many times do we have to do this?
Is a car? How do you say his name? I mean, there's from Issachar, in First Chronicles 12:32, men who understood the times and knew what Israel should do. I mean, their job was to kind of understand and really report back, like the times, what was going on. And you and I've talked about this verse, and I've seen people I really respect, and I think we would all say that it was talking about cultural and societal things that were going on, and it was to report back and to go, how should we address and do? And the tension comes in when we say that. People go, then you just gave me the freedom. When we say, when that line comes in and we start to kind of navigate that path, because it's a real tension, because we say, hey, well, Paul was quoting Dua Lipa, Deadpool, and Dexter, all right there in the courthouse steps. But then Paul's also the guy that says, flee every sign of sexual immorality. Whatever is good, whatever is wholesome, whatever is holy, focus on those things. Like this tension of, Jesus was.
Yeah, I think the key there is focus, though. Focus on those things. Think upon these things. Meditate on these things, not on the other things. So what if we said this? What if we said this? Engage the world, but do it with your Bible open and your brain on. See everything through the lens of Scripture. Just be smart. I think that we should all have common sense to know, is this healthy for me? Is this good for me?
So here's my question then. We've talked, you've never seen an episode of Game of Thrones, have you?
Nope, have not.
I watched a season and a half, 2 seasons, and then Mel and I bailed on it, and it was definitely a conviction thing. I don't. It's pretty graphic at times in that. And I just, with that discussion, and I know you're going to disagree with me, and this might be one of those things. Like, I know you're going to disagree with what I'm saying, and I think we're going to agree. Do you think with that statement, though, that you just said of Bible open, blinders off, did we potentially just give a third of our listeners who would have said there's absolutely no way I'm watching Game of Thrones because of the sexual content, and there's just no way that's healthy spiritually for me? If they go, well, I'll open up my Bible and watch it. Did we just give people permission to watch something that I think you would say is not healthy?
Well, what does your Bible say?
Yeah, but you also said that, like, be aware of what. So, if there is not, I can't, I'm going to be honest, I can't think of a show that people are watching as heavily as that show was watched a few years ago right now. And I'm probably just blanking on a couple of things in my brain as I'm sitting here. But that show was consumed by, I'm going to say, half the planet. I mean, it was absolutely like my feed was full of "I will murder you if you spoil this for me" or something like that. Keep your thoughts to yourself for at least 7 days. I mean, this thing was absolutely consuming the world. At that point in time, if something is that influential in society, if I can watch it with my Bible open, know it's sin, but yet walk into the workplace the next day and I genuinely leverage it. I'm not talking about saying you'll leverage it, but you never have a spiritual conversation with anybody. And I am willing to leverage it for the kingdom. Does that make it okay for me?
How are you leveraging that for the kingdom?
Well, I mean, I'm saying it leads to spiritual conversations of talking about stuff. There's a million ways. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't even agree with everything I'm saying here. I'm saying that that's the tension for me inside of culture and media that can or cannot be consumed is if it opens dialogue with people, because it's something that if it's what's consuming their life, and that's how these shows do now. They consume people's lives. They watch these things. They live them. They listen to podcasts about them. They wake up. It's on their feeds. They talk about it with their friends. It's everything. It's just like a Taylor Swift album. It's all the things they consume. And if you consume this content that maybe isn't there, but it gives you a chance to talk to people, that leads down a path, and you intentionally take it down a spiritual path, and you have good dialogue, healthy dialogue, does that open a door for us to be able to do those things?
Okay, I'm going to ask a different question. This is going to come across, I think this is going to come across as me sounding like I'm holier than thou, and that's not what I intend in any way in this. But we'll just use Game of Thrones because that's what the topic you've been talking about. When it was at its peak, I had many friends of mine that are pastors and Christian leaders that were obsessed with that show. And I can think of at least two people that sitting down having lunches with them and them talking about it and me saying, I don't watch that. I've not seen 1 second of it. Oh, it's so amazing. Well, here's why I don't watch it. Well, yeah. Well, here's what IMDb says. And with one guy, I actually pulled up IMDb sitting at Subway at lunch and saying, here's what it says about it. It's like, well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. I said, I can't subject my mind and my heart to that. That's not the kind of thing that I want to do. And so the conversations you were just saying, we had those conversations, and it caused them. He sent me a text later that afternoon and said, I can't stop thinking about our conversation at lunch. And I think that I need to check the things that I'm watching and what I'm putting into my heart and into my mind.
And that's the conversation I wanted to have. Like, I agree 100% with everything you just said. I wanted to kind of work through that though. And I didn't know if it was going to be me and you in one of our Robert and Tony, like everybody's going to think we're fighting discussions, or in one of those spaces. I agree 100% with what you're saying. But when we talk about this and we go, oh, well, Paul stood out here and quoted this, or Paul said this, or Paul did this, or Jesus told this story, or when Jesus said this, he was actually quoting this here. Or when, let's go to the Old Testament, when, Daniel and the prophets, I think people take and they bend it to where it's going, I will be able to watch. I'm going to start a movie podcast and I want to talk about the most current things. So I'm probably going to have to watch the Black Bag. The new, I just went blank on. Anyway, there's a new movie out, and I can't watch that because it's terrible content.
I can have a heart and a ministry heart and desire for people in the adult sex industry. Okay, I can say, I want to reach out to these people and show them the love of Christ and the whole XXX church thing that was big so long. But the moment that I say to fully understand them, I need to be going into strip clubs so that I fully.
Yeah.
No,
I've got to watch their films.
No, you don't. You don't. You can love, you can engage, you can understand the struggles that they're living with, the things that they're going through, without letting it absorb you, without putting yourself in a situation that's going to be unholy and unhealthy for you.
No, I agree 100%. And I think that's where Romans 12 changes some things. Don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And if you look at Scripture,
and that's what I think I meant.
It is exactly what you meant.
By
it is exactly what you
whatever
meant.
I said a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
engage with it, but do so.
No, I agree 100%. I just think, I mean, the thing is, in that, and I'm fine with people going, Robert, that was a stupid question. But there's, I mean, like, here's the most pastory thing I'll probably say today. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that the people listening to this, there's somebody that was sitting there going, like, okay, he just gave me permission to kind of step into some things, because if I'm watching this with a good perspective of how I'm going to step into, and I can do it with my Bible open and my blinders off, then it's okay. And I wanted to create a little bit of tension there for a second. I wanted to ask a question that I knew you and I would get around to get to this point, because I think that's the exact thing that
I think you can engage without diving in, though.
Oh, I agree 100%, because there is no way that I'm watching some of the movies that have just recently come out. And I will say this, I listen to podcasts where they talk about these things. Like, I listen to podcasts all the time and that dive deep into some movies. And sometimes the question they have is, did this movie need one more sex scene? And I'm so intrigued to hear why you felt, did it have enough sex in this movie? Was there enough murder in this movie? Did it need one more person's head being severed? I mean, like, these are and I listen to this from a perspective of people that are mainstream people, that the vast majority of them would not say they're followers of Jesus. They're not concerned about biblical things. And I'm going, why are you thinking this way about culture? And what can I understand? I get all the thoughts. I've listened to probably 5 podcasts around Fantastic Four and Superman combined, and I have not seen either one of those movies. I know every plot line of those 2 movies. And so I do the same thing with other films that are out there, and I listen to people break down those films, and I don't have to watch the things that are there. And so I agree with you 100%.
Here's one more thing on that, is that discernment isn't always about saying no to everything. Discernment is sometimes about knowing why you're saying yes to something.
It's a good statement. That's a really good statement. I mean, do you want to expound on that any, or do you think that carries us?
I think that's what we've been saying the whole time. It's just kind of a way to kind of wrap that up.
Yeah.
Why is it okay for me to watch Happy Gilmore 2?
I think that's a great thing. I think that's a great question to ask. And I'm going to be honest, some days I sit and I struggle. Like, should I watch something like Happy Gilmore? And so, like, our questions that we had in the end, we've kind of wrestled through. And by the way, thanks for journeying down that path. And I know you may not 100% agree with my thoughts on where people are. Like, you and I agree on the next step and how we should approach this. And we shouldn't just go watch something that, there's a newish, Nicole Kidman movie where she's this, super high level, like, business person and gets into this torrid affair and all of these things. And it's incredibly, and they applaud her for being willing to be that vulnerable at her age. And like, the critics applaud her for being willing to be that sexually and physically vulnerable at her age and do that. And she's a beautiful lady, but I will never watch that show. I will never watch that movie. I mean, because I can't do that. Like you said, I can't do that to my own mind, to what God's calling me to. I can't do that to my spouse. And it doesn't mean that I don't want to consume media because it's popular. And I enjoy understanding what's going on and what's in culture. So I've found ways to hear about these movies, to understand the premise of them, to hear what multiple people think, not just in a isolation chamber, but I typically listen to a couple of podcasts around these things, and I get a couple of different viewpoints. It's a lot harder, thankfully, to find Christian viewpoints on some of these negative things. But thankfully, I have the scriptures. I can open that up and I can understand that from a biblical perspective and go. But Walt Mueller years ago put out his 3D guide, and he said basically discover, discern, decide. Like question one that he had in this 3D guide was, what is the message worldview of this piece of media, whether it's a TV show, a movie, a song, a book, whatever it is. Discern, how does this piece of media hold up in the light of the biblical worldview? And 3, decide, what should I do with this piece of media? What should I do with this song, with this movie, with this thing? So discover, discern, and decide. And you know, it's super interesting to me. I mean, sometimes inside of these articles and things that I read, like I read one article in Time magazine that just said I didn't understand the need for pop culture until I read the Bible. And the closing paragraph in this just said, this article debates highlights many Christians' problematic relationship with pop culture. Some of them make a regular habit of avoiding good art out of fear that it will somehow ruin them. But they're doing themselves and public Christianity more harm than good, given that so many Christians make it a point to keep themselves from participating in secular culture. It's no wonder my faith tradition's contribution to the contemporary world of art has been severely and noticeably lacking. And I just thought, man, what a rough view. Like, you're telling everyone just to step into this. He's taking the exact opposite view of what you said. And it was really interesting in listening to these guys. And this is Time magazine. I mean, pretty popular magazine. And both of those articles that I just read were back from like 2014, 2015, or 2015, 2016. Sorry. And so it's a decade ago. And these conversations are not going to slow down. And as media gets more and more available, it's going to continue. And so, how do we step in to these things? How do we discover? How do we discern? How do we decide what's best for, it's best in our media choices to honor the Father?
Yeah, I wonder if it's about motive and formation. That if you're using culture, okay, if you're engaging culture to have a better understanding of culture, Jesus engaged in culture. We talked about that. And so if you're engaging in culture to look more like Christ, then you're okay. But if you look and see that what you're watching, what you're reading, what you're listening to is shaping your values, then I think you're in trouble. I think maybe you've gotten in too deep. And so I think maybe that's the question that we need to ask ourselves. Maybe that's the question that we need to use kind of as the test is, if culture is forming your values, watch out. Because you can't redeem culture if it's already discipling you. We can't disciple culture if it's already discipling us. And if culture is shaping your worldview, if culture is shaping the way that you think, the way that you feel, if culture is shaping your values, then it's discipling you instead of you engaging and using culture to disciple others.
I think that's great. No, I agree 100%. And the reality is I don't know that there is a perfect outro here, because I mean, there's some people, like personally, I don't drink, and it's a personal thing. And there's people I know who do, and they don't sin inside of that, and they live it very well, and they journey that well. There's people who are going to be able to watch some things in a movie or a TV show, and it doesn't cause them to drift and to move. And those exact same things are going to cause me to really struggle. And I kind of have to navigate some of, I mean, like, is the TV show Friends inherently negative to the point that it should never be flipped back on in my house? And I think, those are the things we tend to struggle with a little bit more, is not so much. I think it's pretty easy to convince somebody you shouldn't watch, somebody who's wanting to follow Jesus, that they shouldn't watch 50 Shades of Grey, or something that, like I said, the Black Bag, this, newer movie that's there, the one with Nicole Kidman that I just mentioned. Like some of these movies that are very, very, very sexually driven, high level, like nudity, sexual content that's stepping into this space. And people go, yeah, I get that. I shouldn't watch that. But it's going like things that subvert these thoughts into our mind of Friends, How I Met Your Mother, Big Bang Theory, that just that promote, like, is that dragging you away from Jesus? Is it dragging you away from the heart of the Father? And you're not even paying attention to it. Like, is your conscience so like neutral or off that you're not even trying to renew your mind?
Yeah, I think this could be a whole podcast of its own. And I don't mean an episode; I mean a whole show.
Well, yeah, I mean we've
talked about that.
And so, and like I totally appreciate what you said there, and I know we need to wrap this up. I think the tension for me is I love this stuff. I could watch and talk about, and I literally like look for often. Like, is Netflix ever, like, people talk about, oh, I watch movies for Netflix. Like, I want that job. I want to watch movies for Netflix, and I will write you. They wouldn't like my reviews, which is why I would never get hired. Like, can I, like, what's the, I'll write reviews. I'll do video blogs. I'll do whatever you want to talk about these things. I'll help create rating systems. I'll do whatever you want inside of that space. I love looking at these things and thinking about, how is this shaping culture? How is this shaping society? And I just think that it's such a complicated thing, because how do we watch Hulu every week and still be holy? And I'm not saying we can't do that. I'm just saying I think it takes a conscious effort, a conscious effort. And
it also takes a conscience.
It does. And I'm reading a book called Conscience right now that a buddy of mine, who's actually going to be on the show in a couple of weeks, told me about. And I'm reading it because of this, and he recommended it, and we were talking through some of these thoughts, and I'm just like, this is something, and it's starting to challenge me a little bit, and kind of how I can move through some of those things. Hey, so thank you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Let us know. Jump in, like, respond to the show, shoot us an email, like, go, y'all are stupid. Wow, that was interesting. Hey, here was some good thoughts. Here's a question I've got around that topic. Here's something you all totally missed in this entire thing. And we understand there's things we missed. It was, couple of episodes, hour long, and we talk about a lot of stuff. So thanks for joining in today with the Pulpit and Porch. We cannot wait to see you next time. Connect with us through email, jump on the website, jump on social media. We would love to talk to you there. Have a great week, and we will see you next time.